AI has changed most things, including people's belief that real people need to be in the presence of education.
Do not use AI where there should be that human connection.
But the point is that you really have to read the room, right?
We actually assess baseline on two different factors. So competence is one of them. It is complemented with confidence. I might be very competent in making food, but I'm not very confident at it. I see a temptation to use AI to give me the first easy answer and then implement that without that. There's a confidence score at the end of each answer, and it is not the confidence that it is right. It is the confidence that you will accept the answer.
Hi, welcome to a session of Meet the Gurus. I'm Paul Siegel. I'm excited to run these sessions because what I get is an opportunity to meet fascinating people who are all walks of life, from the field of education to science to the humanities to sports. And it really gives us a flavor of what gurus, people who are leading edge thinkers or doers, more importantly, in their fields, really get to do. So welcome, Amber, and thanks for joining us on Meet the Gurus. I know you obviously, but I want to hear it from your lips. Tell us a little about what you do.
Hey, Paul, I'm glad to be here. A little bit about me. I have worked my entire professional life in talent development, worked in HR for a large healthcare company, national education leadership company. I've worked in professional sports teams doing talent development. And for the last 6 years, I founded a leadership development company called the Pathwayz Group. And we have worked with over 1 million professionals and leaders all over the globe in more than 75 countries, helping to improve leadership skills like delegation, critical thinking, emotional intelligence through facilitated workshops, online learning, coaching, and workbook materials.
The pleasure today of having Amber Vanderberg here, and I'm excited to have this discussion about where we stand in learning today, or online education, or even offline education, anything regarding knowledge transfer and building up people. So, welcome, Amber. Nice to see you. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you, Paul. I'm glad to be here.
So, we live in a world today where a lot of people appear to believe that AI can do everything, that real people aren't needed in the mix or in the middle, as we like to say. And obviously, you're an expert. You've been working with us. You've worked with many platforms. You have a million students around the world that you interact with, which is pretty awesome. So, I want to jump right into just asking you that question. Where do you feel the real expert, sits these days in the scheme of providing education?
The real expert very much still has a place in the realm of expert in the realm of education. Here it's augmented learning. We do use technology, we do use AI. It helps us tremendously create better experiences, to gather the knowledge, to do our instructional design. I was talking with a client this morning about using AI to better customize and personalize our learning journeys and learning experiences. And so we use AI in these ways, in the design side, the delivery. And where the human comes into play is putting it into action. What we do is we're a leadership development company, and you're leading people, and so you have to have people included in this development stage. The role that we use is we have facilitators that they're going to be able to read the room, to read the emotion, to ask those challenging questions, to build that relationship, to help move the needle forward when it comes to not just leadership knowledge, but leadership application.
What's interesting, you use the word facilitator, and it's kind of a word that we've always used, but people now say instructor. The old school world would be instructor or teacher or professor professing something, but you're really facilitating someone's exploration, right? And you're facilitating their discovery, and hopefully you have more, clarity as to what they should at least look towards to help guide them. I mean, it's a process that is not about, you know, uh, pouring information into the person's head from exactly the way you see it, but facilitating alternative views and giving them the ability to explore. I mean, that's a great word they use, and it's one that I profess highly. Have you seen there's a big difference in the kind of mindset of someone who's a teacher or someone who sits there trying to espouse, truths, let's call them, to learners versus helping them figure it out because we're all, in that stage in our lives at all points.
They're 2 different skill sets. One is an orator. Yeah, one is an orator. Can I stand up and speak? And, just like what you said, I am telling you exactly what you need to know. That is, yeah, an instructor, a teacher. We might also say train and tell you exactly what you need to
Right.
do or know. Facilitator is creating an environment for learning. You are facilitating, uh, yet creating an environment by asking questions, by creating experiences. And so, what that means as a facilitator is you have to be more agile. You have to be able to um, understand the nuances and the dynamics of each group. And while even I, as a keynote speaker, I might have pretty much the same speech that I could do over and over again. There's no two facilitation sessions that will be the same because every group dynamic will be different. I could be facilitating with the same group, and the mood of that day might be different, right? What they are the challenges that they are addressing that day, they're going to change. And so, facilitator, again, for me, is uh, it is being more adaptable. It's being very agile. And there is a place for orators and there is a place for instruction.
Oh,
Facilitation, it is very much creating that open environment for exploration.
and be able to read the room. I mean, often you'll see someone who is a, let's call them professor, and I've had this experience, which I've recounted online, about someone who comes in and professes, tells you all the facts like you're describing them, and there's dead silence in the room. And then you find out that the people who are listening have no idea what this person is talking about because he's talking or she's talking at a level that just doesn't respond to bringing them along. I mean, I tell the story of also Richard Feynman, the incredible physicist, who would start telling you about angular momentum by discussing how the ancients used to believe that angels pushed the stars around the earth and the angels were flapping their wings. But he said there's some truth to that. And then he described how angular momentum works and gravity keeps these planets in place, or at least these stars, or whatever the example, and maybe it was the moon in that case. But the point is that you really have to read the room, right? A facilitator has to understand where the person is, and it can take them very fast up the curve, but not if you don't know where they are on the curve.
Not if you don't know where they are. It's one of the biggest challenges that we see and something we have to ask ourselves of what is the baseline of our audience. And we actually had a situation about a year ago where we had a new program that we were rolling out. And we thought we had assessed the baseline pretty well. Our first iteration, we very quickly realized that we needed to go a couple notches down. We actually tried it a second time and went, it was more effective. We're gonna do a couple more notches down, have a more approachable baseline, and it was from that baseline that it was a longer learning journey, a longer learning pathway, but we saw significant more growth. And that comes you're not going to get that data if you're just speaking. If you don't have the data to show what that baseline is, and with a facilitation, you're going to get to know that baseline pretty quickly. One of the challenges that we see with going into facilitation is some of your most rewarding content or takeaways aren't going to come from the person with the microphone or the person that's standing up. They're going to come.
Right.
You might not even hear what that main takeaway is because it was said in a small group or it was said to a peer. But that's the point. It's not for your satisfaction. It's for the people that are in the room to get the information, the action steps, the action plan to implement it within their work life and within their life.
Yeah, one of the things you're talking about also, I recall back in the day, as you say, used to say, in where you do live workshops in a specific place where the audience, the enterprise, the client didn't really know exactly who should be in the room. So they brought in senior people and junior people, and they thought there was some all benefit in doing that, which there is. But there was no real way to level set. And this idea of level setting, some people think that there should be testing. And I've had experiences where testing is a long, long process, which is kind of a waste of time. But what's your experience in terms of asking people where they are and saying, here's a series of, even if you were to do it in assessment format, but asking someone what sort of confidence they have. I use confidence as a metric to understanding or articulating or explaining or presenting an idea. How do you look at level setting in terms of assessments of individuals in a, whether live or online setting?
Great question. So we actually assess baseline on two different factors. So competence is one of them. It is complemented with confidence. I might be very competent in making food, but I'm not very confident at it, right?
Sure.
In the same way, I might be very, very confident that I'm a great cook, but nobody wants to eat my cooking. And we see this in things like AI. We'll ask people, so what's your competence level? What would you say your skill level is at AI? And someone goes, oh, I'm amazing. I am the expert. I could write books on how good I am at AI. And then we ask them to write a prompt, and
Right.
there's room for improvement. And then we also see people that are actually better than what they think at maybe writing a prompt, but their confidence is so low that it's the hesitation that is also impacting their performance. It's not that they can't do it, they just don't have that confidence, they don't have, that reassurance that they can walk confidently in their performance, and both of those impact the application. And so, you measure these on 2 different levels. On confidence, we'll ask things more broadly, like, "How comfortable are you with this?" On a scale of 1 to 5. We use a Likert scale. How comfortable are you with this? How confident are you? How familiar are you with this? And so we check on that confidence level because it is the impact application and performance. And then with the competence, we will ask more direct questions. And we again ask them more action based. So show me how you do this.
Right.
Give me an example of how you do this. And it's more storytelling and more action steps. A lot of people can just have it in their head, but what have you done with it, or would you know what to do in this situation?
Yeah, evidence. I mean, I always call that in selling, you could call it evidence based selling. Here, I will show you what I've done, and you don't need to sell anything because people see it. And similarly, great interviews are often, tell me, show me what you've done and explain to me why you've done it that way. And it may not be what I'm looking for as an employee or as a colleague, for example, but at least I know what you know, and then I can probe you with, what about this? How would you handle that problem? And I've had, very recent experiences with this where, one of the biggest challenges I've found in an organization, it's one we try to foster is just the ability to stand up, even when you say 1,000 times, please tell me what you're thinking, speak up. People sit, and culturally sometimes there's a big divide, particularly when the world we live in where, you'll be on a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting and there'll be 10 countries represented. And you're not sure how to reflect or how to get each one to be speaking. Um, and I think that's a big challenge, cross-cultural, issues as well. In terms of AI, I mean, what do you feel the biggest challenges for educators, to start with the educator side of the equation in AI today?
I'm going to talk about the challenges and the opportunities because
Sure.
there's both. Um, I'll talk about the opportunities first. I love using AI, and this is where a lot of educators have this opportunity, is to use AI to create more custom experiences, more personalized experiences. The time that we save on the instructional design is incredible. I can have a discovery call or have an assessment gather the correct data and then input that into our existing frameworks, what we already have, and it can create incredible design that, of course, then we go in and check and tweak. It saves not just hours, but days worth of time. Right now, we're working within our platforms of using AI to have a general direction for an entire company. So let's give an example of the entire team moving forward in the topic of performance feedback. There's foundational knowledge, foundational action steps that we want everyone in the company to take. We want clarity in setting performance expectations, clarity in giving feedback, receiving feedback, applying data. Then, whenever you go into your personal application and your follow up resources, You can customize that to the nuances of your team. Some leaders might have a team that they have really challenging feedback they have to give. Some might have brand new team members and they need to, or they're leading new teams, they need to figure out how they're going to give feedback there. Some may have teams that have excellent feedback culture already and they want to get better. These are different nuances that we can use AI to help customize that in and personalize that application while organizationally we are still going in the same direction. So you have commonality of language, values, vernacular, so you can help one another organizationally. You also have this customization of the nuances of your team. So these are a couple examples, right? We could go on and on about
Sure.
what AI can do in the realm of education. From the design point, this is where I get very excited. Some of the challenges that we do face is the temptation to just have AI create all of the instruction and not no, I mean, we already have the research and the knowledge and the frameworks of what has worked. We can create things that are specific to our company, our competitive advantage, our innovation, to
Sure.
make it just better. So I will give you a good generic, and then we can improve it. I see a temptation to use AI to just give me the first easy answer and then implement that without that human
Pushback.
oversight. It's that critical thinking. And it is a huge request we're getting more of is, hey, we have this tool, and if it's used inappropriate or if it's used irresponsibly or inappropriately, meaning the incorrect data,
Yeah.
proprietary data, it can hallucinate. And we have seen it come up with some
Sure.
poor instructional design. Not even, "Oh, this isn't very good," but that is inaccurate information, or that is from a leadership side, from a people development curriculum. Oh, that's actually harmful information that could impact relationships and human dynamics within a team.
Well, it's part wasn't there the assumption that someone that it's giving you answers? I mean, it's giving you it's like, people have this almost I wouldn't call it religious, but some sort of, perception that this thing, AI, whichever models you're using, whichever platforms you're using, gives you the right answer. It gives you interpretations of all sorts of information, and the minute you push back, you get, "Oh, sorry, let me change that around." So, that simple insight that you can actually push back requires someone to have critical think as you just pointed out, critical thinking skills. The ability to say, that doesn't seem right to me. You're really, you're not right about that." And then you can get, so it's this idea that it's the definitive source of something. It's a source of further knowledge, but it's maybe incorrect. As you say, it could be hallucinating, it could be exaggerating, it could be completely mis or confabulating things that just don't exist. But I think the part of it is that it requires, I guess, the ability to write the prompts, to be critical thinking about the answers that come out of the prompts, and to then frame it within a company's dynamic. Let me ask you to what extent you've had experiences in, and this is, maybe more on the data side, but really, organizations do have proprietary ways of looking at things. I don't know the exact numbers, but I think about 70% of all training or educational learning content comes from within an organization, 30% from outside by organizations that provide services like you and we do, et cetera. So how do you get over that gap of having all this information inside of company, and how does that these so-called rags or inference models that are built around a company's situation, a bank in Canada in this kind of way, or a aerospace company in Europe of this kind? Because that's very different than a generic model that most of the ones available to the public are today.
You're correct. Yes. There's I'm smiling because the every every team and every company is different. There are nuances.
Yes,
In my experience, they're not as different or as unique as what
I think they are.
many companies would like to believe, right?
Sure, exactly.
"Oh, Amber, this is so unique. It's so different."
Right.
Ah, we've seen
Seen
nuances of
before.
it before, right?
Correct.
And so which is great because you see we're all people. It's human dynamics, and so there are some trends that we see within just teams and leadership in general. I have a younger sister, and she is a preschool teacher, and she tongue in cheek, calls me the great reminder. She goes, Amber, I teach it the first time in preschool, and you remind people of these basic principles that we've. She's not incorrect.
Right.
And so the foundation is larger than what some assume. You do have nuances within industry. So let's give the example of banking. That's a lot of proprietary information. I don't even want to play with putting any proprietary banking information into my AI. I can say, hey, here it is the foundational knowledge of our leadership principles. Let's say there is a banking institution that has a lack of trust and conflict within a team. Give me examples from other public knowledge banking institutions, solutions that have been seen in the public within banking specifically. And so I can use industry knowledge, I can use the fundamental knowledge of leadership, team dynamics as a whole. And then one thing that we will do is use some similar information. Obviously, we don't use the name, similar information that then we can customize. So,
Sure.
um, instead of putting, we may put in some fake fake data that is similar related, right? So, like I said, it's not true. It's yeah, and so that'll get us in the right direction.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've had, similar types of experiences where you're trying to customize training for organizations. I think one of the biggest challenges, and this is what I've seen, is there's a huge disconnect between the so-called line of business, the people who are doing the work of aerospace or engineering or anything or banking or any other field, and often the learning and development team that's designed to or intending to help people become more skilled. So it's a big gap, and I've always said the most successful people I've seen in learning development, to be honest, are typically women who have come back from being in the business. Let's say they had children, they didn't want to go back to full time work in the business, and were in the L&D team. That's not a sex based comment, just been a reality. And now there are, of course, men who have been in the business and gone into learning and development as well. But the ability to really understand the problem, which comes down to understanding the problem, it always comes down to this hyper personalization idea that how can you use AI to create that personalization, which you may or may not, as an L&D professional or someone, who's trying to design training, have the knowledge of. And I think AI does give you that kind of leg up. Example.
Industry knows it.
Study.
Knows it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it can give you some of that.
Mhm.
Some again, foundational knowledge. Now it's still up to me to build the relationship with the client, understand what the nuances are.
Sure.
Like this, it's still up to me. I love what you said earlier about it's just going to provide an answer. And our company, we work mostly with technology institutions, technology companies. And so two things I'll never forget. I was working with some developers that were creating AI tools, and he said, Amber, there's a confidence score at the end of each answer, and it is not the confidence that it is right. It is the confidence that you will accept the answer. And that's a very different mindset. Oh, I'm looking at
Or
that.
the first lip will come in also. It's like, will you accept what's told to you, either if it's completely false or spot on accurate, right? It's kind of
Not the
like,
percentage of correctness, it's the percentage of acceptance. And those are two very different numbers. And so that's important to keep in mind.
yeah.
And then we actually, because we work, obviously, we're an L&D department, we work with a lot of HR. And so we actually asked several dozen technologists, what is it that you wish HR people knew and did, L&D people knew and did whenever it comes to AI and AI in that industry. And Paul, the answer we got was pretty consistent across the board. And it was this because Amber, we want people to use AI where their AI should be used, right? Where it can be automated, where it's transactional work. That's important. Please use AI in those areas. And do not use AI where there should be that human connection, where you should have that further human conversation, right? Is it more efficient to fire everyone through email? Yes. Is that the most effective way to actually continue that relationship? Well, no. Let's have that conversation. And so we have to find this balance of, hey, there are opportunities and limitations at the same time.
One of the things I've found is fascinating is sort of a subversion of what you're saying, and maybe generational, and may just be experiential. Believe is that if you don't understand prior technology, it's very hard for you to understand what will come next or what could come next. And I use a funny example. I always say, I can test how old you are if you're under the age of 35. If you don't get this question right, then you probably, you know, you're under the age of 35. And the question is, do you use email? And the answer is yes. And I say, what does CC stand for? And someone typically under the age of 35, because they were being born when email was around, did not know CC stands for carbon copy, or BCC, blind carbon copy. And then you explain what carbon copy was, and then it gets into a whole interesting discussion. But the point is, you could use technology today and use it and click on the CC, and it never not a clue as to what it means. Now, for me, I don't know how you go forward in using technology if you don't know what was before. If you don't know you had to type a paper and you couldn't just, recall it from memory when you had it on paper. And that
Mm.
is a challenge, I think, of technology today. Everything becomes so easy that you don't have go back to this phrase you used before, critical thinking skills, critical evaluation skills to push back and say, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense to me. So, you know, I guess one of the key areas for developing skills today is not only writing, but also critical thinking. How do you push back? How do you push back? So not just push back so you fight like the world we live in today, this friction, but push back so you get a positive moving forward. I pushed back on the AI, but I got a better answer that seems more, as you said, more believable to me. Maybe it's not completely right, but so how do you do that? How do you train people to say, be a critical thinker? I mean, besides wearing a hat that says be a critical thinker, right?
Exactly. It's so critical thinking, strategic thinking, emotional intelligence, and really creativity, innovation are the top 3 topics that we're getting significantly, in the last year. I mean, it's significantly. And with strategic thinking, I'm gonna say strategic thinking and critical thinking, they are different, but I'm gonna put
Mhm.
them in the same category for this purpose of this conversation. It begins with with going from here in the laptop and the screen to looking outside and saying,
Sure.
"What is going on in the industry, what's going on in the world, what's going on in the organization, and identifying some of those trends. How does what I'm doing apply to the overall
Sure.
process within the team, process within the organization? And it's just like what you said of, hey, you have to know what came before in the process and what's coming and what we're preparing for in some way, right? We can't fully predict, but hey, we're going in this direction of we're going in this direction. And so uh this takes longer. It takes a little bit more time of sharpening your axe before you're cutting the tree. And so a lot of our approaches whenever we are teaching people critical thinking, strategic thinking, it is actually begins, obviously there's more steps after this, but it begins by going from here to here and looking up and seeing how does what I'm doing right now apply to everything else. And that's where our critical thinking or our strategic thinking can really
Sure.
it can really be put at risk if we don't understand how our actions, how our decisions, especially as leaders, and the decision I'm making in this room, I have to critically think, I have to strategically think, how does this decision impact everything else? And before I can get to that question, I first have to understand what all else is out there. What questions should I be asking? Do I understand the other players that are involved and the roles that they play? And so, yeah, that's our first step of critical thinking, strategic thinking, whether it be physically or metaphorically, getting your head up and looking around.
I want to ask a question about games and gamification, for lack of a better word, and using the context that I took a Scrum class and I became a certified Scrum Master. And the first thing that the class was all about was kind of a game. And I'll tell you the quick story of the game. The game was we had a few hundred ping pong balls in a bag, 30 people in the class. Okay, and there were some rules. Here's the rules of the game. The rules are very simple. Everyone has to touch each ball once, and you have to have verification that it was touched.
Yeah.
And you can't let the ball touch the ground. You can't put it in someone's hand. You can throw it to them. You can drop it in their hand however you wish. And then you have to verify that. If it drops on the ground, it's a defect in software terms, kind of fun. And if it's not touched, meaning it's sitting there in the bag or something like that, it's backlog, which is kind of interesting. So you take a game and you made a software engineer thing, and the instructor said go. And so, did we form a circle? Did we form a line? How was the line formed? How do we arrange this? How many? And it was interesting in the first, go round, which was maybe 2 minutes, a minute and a half. We dropped half the balls. No one knew what shape we were in. By the time we did at the end, it was dead silent in the room. And I mean, week later, I mean, 15 minutes later, maybe 2 rounds later, we realized how to organize. And it was through this game that we realized organization. And almost in a minute, you got what Scrum was about. Right? It didn't have to be complicated, it didn't but the game so forming and creating a game, in this case was an excellent one, I thought, that really resonated and is to this day memorable to me, and I'm not gonna get into the details of how we organized it, but because each team could organize it differently and become just as effective, right? That was half the point as well. But how do you go about I mean, you walk into an environment, you're trying to demonstrate or make me elicit something, right, in your facilitation role, and maybe it's by industry, maybe it's by not industry. This was not by industry in this case example. But how do you go about creating a game? You've built that type of environments in the past. So maybe use an example or tell me a little about how you did that.
Oh, I mean, we learn through experiences, right? We learn through experiences. My approach and our company's approach is a bit unique because I have experience doing we don't even call it instructional design anymore. We call it behavioral design. So we've done curriculum development. I have done curriculum development in educational settings. So with high school students, with middle school students, there's a lot of games involved that I pull from there.
Sure.
I worked with athletics, with professional academy teams and athletic teams, and so obviously that you're on the field, you're on the court, and you're building up games there. And then of course you have the corporate side. What I do, my approach is there are some inspirations I take just from my personal experience of that's something that we use to teach soccer players better communication on the field, and I can tweak this a little bit and teach developers how to better communicate within a project, right? Especially within a sprint. So some of that is just using uh, you again getting your head up and looking around. I
Sure.
gonna share two stories about my sister in one podcast, but we walked into a store when it was a kids store, and we both walked in and picked up the same game and said, she said, I can. Uh, simplify this and I can teach this concept to the kids. I said, I can complex this and I can teach it to
Sure.
my adults. And so I legitimately go to the game board aisle in my store to gain inspiration. I mean, so I don't have, so as much as I love the games that I come up with out of my own head, I also like to see where can I draw inspiration from experiences in the world. What are some games that I'm seeing kids play on the playground that I'm seeing adults play? Yeah, in board games. So
Sure.
part of that is inspiration. I then look at those games and say, well, what are the key principles that I have learned? I'll give an example. I was working with a tech team that they did a quick game to better develop their front end interface that they were creating. I said, I think I can take this. They were drawing pictures and they were 20 seconds, draw really quick pictures, built upon it. I said, I
Hmm.
think that I can shift that into setting expectations within the team.
Hmm.
And that's exactly, you change the prompt, you give a different time constraint. It's still a different way of communicating. So part of that, literally drawing inspiration from my
Hmm.
world.
Sure.
Whenever I'm doing instructional design or whenever I'm doing my curriculum development, uh, I I ask myself, okay, what exactly? So your example of the ping pong balls, of what exactly am I trying to teach in this moment? What's the experience I want them to have? What's the emotions I want them to feel? And especially if they're a longer it's a longer experience, right? We did a quick strategy game of team tic-tac-toe, and I'll tell one story. We did team tic-tac-toe where one person has the X and one person has uh, the O's, noughts and crosses. One person has noughts and one person has crosses. And so they're running back and forth, putting their X's and O's on. And one team, they had one person left and the game was over. They had won this game. And sure enough, the person in all of the noise and the excitement and the stress and the speed, they put they put their mark on the wrong place.
Sure.
Nobody had communicated with this person of, "Hey, you should put it over here." No one had talked. They had just assumed, "Oh, he's got this. He's good to go." No one had talked to him and no one had strategized, and he put it in the wrong place, and the team just completely so angry. I mean, just wanted to kick him off the
Sure.
team because he made
Sure.
this mistake, and I go, "Was the mistake on him because he put the X in the wrong place, or was the mistake on the rest of the team for
Love
not
communication.
communicating it?" And
Sure.
so we learn these games, we learn these games at a young age. They're reiterated whenever we're older, in maybe in more
Mhm.
complex board games.
Sure.
Um, and I'll take a simple board game like that and and then add complexities to it, right? I had a coach very early on in my career, and he said, "Amber, the sign of a good coach," and in coaching, you do curriculum development as well. Said the sign of a good coach is not the one who knows the first skill, right? The first activity. It's not even the one that knows the next activity. So how you progress upon it. First, you kick the ball, then you pass the ball. Go, it's the coach that knows how to progress at least 3 levels and above, and the coach that knows how to simplify at least 1 level or 2 levels below. And so you
Sure.
have that foundation and I can look and say, "This is the activity for the experience level of this team, the executive team, um, culturally where I'm at, how
Sure.
comfortable this group may be in interaction." I I'm not gonna stretch too far or too little. I can progress or simplify, but I have the foundation. And then that's on us as a company to train our facilitators to know the foundation, know the progressions, and know the regressions within the foundation of a game. It was a longer,
I would. That's fine. I've whenever I've traveled all over the world, I used to buy my kids toys from every country because I found the toys of a country tell you a lot about the country. And I was in India a few months ago, and I was with my team, and we were watching those television going on in the background as we were having drinks at a restaurant. And I said, "Can you explain the game of cricket to me? Because I just don't understand it." And I said, "And I'll try to explain the game of baseball to you." And you realize that it's very hard to simplify because, and it's very hard for people to understand how to even explain something that they know like the back of their hand very, very well. But then to simplify it so someone who's coming in from nowhere can understand it and begin to play, really understand because there's so many rules in these games that are layered on top of them that probably even many of them changing. But it's really, it's sort of like in an organization, right? Bring it back to organization. You need to bring someone to an organization, help them understand the rules of the game, not rules like in the regulations of how use your office equipment or anything of that sort, but what is the mindset of the organization? How do you help someone really understand the mindset? We talk about how there's no hierarchy here. There's no everyone has it's an open book. You constantly communicate. But then you realize that it's some people have very different interpretation of what that means.
yes.
Very interpretation. So that's an interesting challenge, I think, to any certainly any facilitator, anyone who's trying to bring knowledge and cultural change or digital transformation in your organization. How do you help people understand what is where we are, where we want to go, and how do we get there?
Well, even beyond the facilitator, many times people within their own organization have different, uh,
Sure,
yeah, different explanations of what that means. We had a situation a few months ago where we had a team, the executive team of a large organization, and I just simply asked, "Okay," it was a nonprofit organization, and I said, "So tell me, why does this organization exist? Like,
sure,
nonprofit, you have a purpose. Tell me what is the purpose in this room?" And from 15 people, I got 15 different answers. Comical to me is one of the people was a new person from the team, and they had gone on the website and looked up what is the mission and the purpose of this company. And they said, well, this is exactly what it is. I know this is the right answer because it's what's on the website. And so he reads it out loud, and the other 14 people in the room go, yeah, that's what we say, but that's not really it. I go, "Okay, so if it's not what you it's not if it's not what's on the website, if it's not what you think, it's not what they think, let's discover." And so it's having a commonality of language. And this is where we look at learning strategy and say it's not about the number of learning objectives you have. If you're trying to have 30 learning objectives, you're gonna have 30 different understandings. We'd rather you have just two focus areas and have narrowed focus. Say, we clearly know what this means, how it is applied, how we're measuring data. And to the example that I give is it's like going to the gym and trying to work out every muscle all at the same time.
Sure.
And you're going to see some progress, but you don't exactly know where that main progress is, and you're not going to grow in that skill. So let's focus on becoming runners and focusing on these two aspects. You're going to have a smaller data set, but a clearer data set. And as educators, right, as people who work in the development industry, uh, we have to show the data of what the impact has been of this learning journey. And if we're trying to collect 20 different data points, it's going to be really no data points. It's going to be very little impact. Instead, we say these are the action steps. And what we measure is actual action, and not only completion of a learning pathway, but we have 85% of our students, of our professionals, they have an action step that's been implemented 2 weeks after the end of the program. Okay, like that's a measurable action step that we
Yep.
can look at. And so part of it is asking that question, getting the commonality of language, but it's also the commonality of direction. And that it comes with repetition, not only through words. I'm saying this with my words, and I'm reiterating that through my action. I'm reiterating that through the investment. I'm reiterating that through what my processes are saying. Right? If we say we want innovation, but the process for submitting a new idea is 20 steps long, I'm not reiterating that idea. We have to reiterate our words through our processes, our resources, our actions, our projects, our roles, uh, organizationally to have true, clear direction.
Well, Amber, thank you very much for taking the time for us today and look forward to seeing you again in another session.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
We all love meeting interesting people. Meet the Gurus is my adventure with you, traveling the world, connecting with people all over with different insights from technology and business, entrepreneurship and design, all sorts of things that help us understand what we do in our lives, our careers, and how we can be bigger and better, happier and more satisfied, all the things that we would like to achieve. Come join me.